when we talk about privilege, we're not talking about it because we're angry or we're bitter. We're talking about it because it provides opportunities that others don't have. It's quite common for a lot of organisations that the senior tiers of organisations are not diverse. And what that says to the organisation and what that says to people from diverse backgrounds is there's no space for you here. It's exclusive.
If an organisation, be it in the public sector or wherever, could do one thing to just genuinely improve the lack of representation in senior leadership. And it's quite a big question, but if there was one thing that you feel would make a huge difference and it just doesn't happen enough, what would it be?
If power in the UK has a colour, it's still predominantly white.
Only about 11% of board members identify as Black, Asian, or minority ethnic.
I can't change the colour of my skin. I'm not going to change that I'm a woman. I can't change what class I am, and I don't want to either. I'm very proud of who I am and where I come from.
New research shows that fewer than 5% of the UK's top leaders come from ethnic minorities.
The reality is, if you're Black, if you're Asian, or if you're an ethnic minority, it is harder for us.
Sharie, thank you so much for being the first guest on RISEilience. Honestly, I couldn't think of anyone better, and I'm just so pleased to have you join us and share your experiences. You'll be amazing.
Thank you. No, honestly, thanks so much. Firstly, thank you for having me on the show. I'm so excited. This is incredible. And secondly, thank you for providing a platform for people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds to have their voice around some of the kind of issues and challenges that they've experienced in the workplace and also in their careers. I think it's really important. I think particularly in this time where we are a few years after the death and the murder of George Floyd. And I think that shook up the world, but it shook up the workplace a lot as well in a different way and created new opportunities through diversity and inclusion. So I think there have been some opportunities, but I still think there's a long way to go. So I think it's really positive that we've got something like this to kind of share our experiences.
Absolutely.
Through.
And I do, just in reflection to that, I feel like there was this sudden and absolutely right need to do so much that organisations were almost running behind themselves. Yeah, exactly. Trying to meet everything. And as a result, I think we lost some of the quality of what could be done. And that is hopefully when now we're in a place where we can reflect, step back and have more of these one-on-one conversations, focusing more on quality than trying to get everything done and done quickly.
But I also think it's about innovation around what we can do to make a difference in the workplace, because I still think that, and you see it a lot, like after that incident and that time, and, obviously COVID, and there was so much around race inequality, there were significant changes. But actually, were those changes lasting? Where are we now? Have people taken their foot off the gas? Have we forgotten about, the commitments that we said we'd make, or are people still delivering? And I think for those that genuinely want to be true to making a difference, I think this is where the podcast could really, come into play, because I think there'll be things that are shared through this RISEilience podcast that will be really beneficial to employers.
I hope so. If it gets even close to what you've said, then we've done our job. Hey. I kept thinking, where do we start this conversation? Where's good? And I thought, where better than just with you, your career journey. And what I'm really interested in is where it started and what has got you to the point where you are today.
Okay. So I think for context, I'd say, and I say context of aspirations. So for context of aspirations, I grew up in a working class family. My dad worked for Royal Mail. My mum was a care worker. But obviously they like my mum's Jamaican, my dad's Nigerian. They met here and they had their family. And so obviously their experiences of the UK were quite different. And actually, their employment was probably different to obviously where mine is right now. But one thing that was instilled in me through family was just work hard. You can have whatever you want if you just really kind of work hard and you commit to it. And I think that's probably been one of my mantras. Although my thing's probably more been around focus on what you want and focus on outcomes, and they will be delivered. So I've always kind of focused on what is it I want to achieve. And even going into jobs, I've always focused on, I want to do this well, I want to do that well. And I feel like that's kind of helped me progress my career. Just really kind of being focused on what it is I've wanted to achieve. I mean, some of it maybe in the early stages was motivated by It might have been motivated by ego, like wanting to be a manager, or it might have been motivated by money, like I need to get more money to do X, Y, and Z. But ultimately, I got to a point where it's been motivated on making a difference. I've always worked in public service, and I've always wanted to give back to my community in ways that I could. And more importantly, just advocating for those that can't advocate for themselves. I think that's something that's been really important for me. Like being in spaces and places where I can make a difference and I can advocate for people that maybe don't have the tools or the resources, maybe even the language, the experience, whatever it might be, to advocate for others. And I think maybe that comes from being a big mouth at school and just always sticking up for other people.
Really? I hadn't noticed.
You can talk. But yeah, no, I think I've always had that kind of, I'd probably say it's probably a protective nature where I've just wanted to protect other people. And I think doing that through my career has been really important to me. So in terms of where my career started, I'd say after drifting a lot and not really knowing what I wanted to do, because, and this is the thing, I think maybe even as a young person, not necessarily tapping into career opportunities, I didn't know all the jobs that were out there. Like I remember first wanting to be a teacher, wanting to be a HR manager because I thought I liked people. But yeah, just not quite knowing what I wanted to do and then kind of falling into something and finding my groove in it. And I'd say that my career kickstarted when I went to work for the National College for School Leadership as a temp. And from there, one of the managers just, I don't know what she saw in me. I don't know why she saw it in me, but she just really kind of supported me. And I remember her name to this day, but she really supported me and encouraged me to progress. And she just said, I think she gave me an opportunity. She invested in a project management training for me and just gave me an opportunity to cover like an adoption leave for a period. And oh my God, when I think back to that time, I just think, oh my God, you were so out of your depth. But I remembered, and I think maybe Richard Branson had said it, when you're given an opportunity, you take the opportunity and you figure out how to do it afterwards. Do you know what I mean? Like I knew I wasn't saying no to this opportunity. I liked the environment I was in. I liked the space that I was in. I liked the fact that she saw something in me and was prepared to invest. She was taking a chance on me. And I just thought, I can't let her down. The National College for School Leadership then became the National College for Teaching and Leadership, or maybe it was the other way around, can I remember now? And then it was taken over by the Department for Education. So I worked for the Department for Education for a short while on a national initiative for schools. I had an opportunity to work with head teachers through the projects that I was delivering around school improvement programs for schools, because the ambition at that time was to have kind of first class learning in the capital, in London. So that was kind of the ambition. And then I was approached to work for a multi-academy trust to do some of the work that I've been doing at the Department for Education around teaching schools, which were kind of like teaching hospitals. You know, the concept was around having outstanding schools, working with other schools to improve them and to make sure that they were also on this journey to outstanding. So through that, again, I had an opportunity to work with like head teachers and senior leaders from the Multi-Academy Trust, but also from across London. And being in a space where you're working with people who are at the top of their game, it was just incredibly like inspiring for me. I remember just kind of being in awe of all of these people. But I also remember very often playing the how many people of colour are in the room game. I call it a game because it's something and it's interesting because I know that people from Black and ethnic backgrounds might do that a lot, but I wonder if white people started to do that in spaces. A, do they do that? And B, what are your thoughts on it? When you go into rooms and quite comfortably, they're not diverse, but that is a problem. And when we talk about privilege, that privilege makes you blind to the fact that there's no diversity in the room.
That's very interesting, isn't it? Because we definitely notice it.
We definitely notice it.
I've never thought, do they notice it?
They probably don't because it's the norm. But I remember I took one of my friends, I took one of my white friends raving with me, and she was probably one of few white people in the room. And I think it was a bit of a shock to the system because she wasn't used to being in an environment like that. So I just think that people need to be mindful that when we talk about privilege, we're not talking about it because we're angry or we're bitter. We're talking about it because it provides opportunities that others don't have. And if we think about the fact that we live and work in a multicultural society and we do not have diverse people in the room, we are not fully representing our society. We do not know the experiences. We're not advocating or talking or representing the experiences of people that are not in the room. So are we really in a position to make decisions? And I'm talking about public sector here, public service. Can we really make sound decisions if we don't reflect that representation? And also, are we creating a pathway for others if we don't have that representation? So I know that I've been in spaces where the senior, and I think it's quite common for a lot of organisations that the senior tiers of organisations are not diverse. And what that says to the organisation and what that says to people from diverse backgrounds is there's no space for you here. It's exclusive. It's not inviting. And actually, as a Black woman, I know that I wouldn't want to go into that space and be the only Black woman in that space. I know someone has to be the first, but I'm saying it's not an inclusive space if I'm the token. Because also I don't represent the experience of all Black people. I don't represent the experience of all Black women. I don't represent the experience of women who are from Asian backgrounds, from Somali background, from different cultured backgrounds as a Black African Caribbean woman. So we need that diversity.
Do you feel that has happened where just because you happen to be the only one representing, people expect you'll have all the answers or you're speaking on behalf of...
I think it's a default thing. Yeah, I don't think it's an intentional thing.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it then becomes...
It's a lot of pressure, isn't it?
It is a lot of pressure. It then becomes, well, because you're in the room and you're a person of from an ethnic background, you can speak on behalf of everybody. And actually, through a lot of the work that I've done and engagement I've done, I realise actually I'm quite privileged. I've had quite a privileged upbringing compared to some. And there are a lot of... thinking about population, of course I can't represent everybody. And which is why I genuinely think we need different people. I think and also we know experience brings different perspectives, which is why I'm saying we need diversity. We've got the British experience. We've got, I'm British born, so we've got that experience. But what about someone who's not British born and their experience of Britain and some of the challenges that they've experienced? Do you know what I mean? That's why I'm just saying to you, it's so important to have diversity, because you have diversity of thought. It's not just diversity of
numbers.
Yeah, it's not diversity of numbers. It's not just diversity of gender. It's not just diversity of colour. It's diversity of thought and experience. And that is what we need at the table.
One of the things that you mentioned was someone saw something in you. You don't quite even know what that is. And in your eyes, they took a risk. You wanted to make sure you can deliver, not let them down. This sense of naturally, like you say, our parents teach us to just work hard and we constantly think that is the skill. Mm-hmm. Do you think that is something that has now shifted in you? I don't mean do you still work hard? I guess it's more about the whole...
You know what it's like, when you move up, you work harder.
I know, it's the opposite. I guess my question is more, as you've progressed into a head of service role now, do you feel... no, now I know what I bring to the table? Or do you still think, they see something in me and it's amazing and I'm so grateful? And I'd probably say it's a combination of both. And it's funny, actually, I was having a conversation with my mum last night. I can't remember what it was. I think it was talking about my son and, the fact that he's a follower. And, and she said, basically along the lines of the conversation was, I've always been a leader, is what she said. My brother and sister will tell you I've always been bossy, but yeah. And so we had the conversation around, are leaders born or are they created? Yes. That's a question. And I think, and she reminded me about school reports that she'd had about me, and that there were certain skills that were always there. And I think that there are some things that I just think I do feel are a gift. Like sometimes I just do things and I'm just like, how did you know to do that? Where did that come from? Like I just have a vision, or I just feel like it needs to be this way. Like working even with my events team, I'm saying like we're going to do an event and I want it to be like I've got a clear vision for how this event needs to be and what I want the experience to be through this event and the kind of setting I need it to be in order for it to work. And
then at the same time, there are things that have been practiced. I've had to practice to get it right. It's like I've had to rehearse. I've probably spent my whole career rehearsing certain things. And I remember in my first role working at the National College for School Leadership and working with like head teachers. So I remember feeling really intimidated because I'm working with professionals who are at the top of their game. And I'm just like, I remember being in awe. I remember also there was no one that looked like me. But again, there was always someone who would kind of take me under their wing. And I think, I feel like I was quite young and quite inexperienced. And, it was my first time in a very kind of corporate environment. But I just remember thinking that I need to emulate the people that I'm around. If I want to be, they say like, whatever you're aspiring to be, you need to be exposed to, and you need to be in a space with those people. And I was thinking, I need to emulate like just how refined they were in their presentations, just how they would articulate things, perspective. Like I remember practically studying the leaders that I was working around to what I would probably say refine my professional approach, because I felt like this is, in order for me to progress, I need to be like the people that I'm around, even though I had a very different background. I remember being in these kind of networking events thinking, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know. I didn't know how to network. I didn't know, because I just thought to myself, I was in my early 20s. These people are in their 40s, 50s and 60s. I don't know what we've got. I'm a young black girl who grew up on a council estate. Like, I don't know what to initiate a conversation with you about. I was insecure in my knowledge about politics and the system. Like I genuinely didn't know. I remember being so nervous all the time. And ask me how I got through it. I don't know. Up to this day, I don't know. But I also think that people don't appreciate how those cultural differences are a difference. I've got friends who grew up with going to socialising with their parents in environments like the environments that I'm talking about, so wouldn't have felt as intimidated as I felt. And what would my advice be to other colleagues that are in those spaces? My advice would be, remember that you only grow when you're outside of your comfort zone. And I think that's why my learning curve was so steep, because I was completely out of my comfort zone, didn't know what I was doing, but I embraced it and I studied it and I looked for opportunities in it. I would definitely say that obviously, being at the stage that I'm at now, I'm probably a more refined version of the Sharie of old. And I've worked on, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's still a lot I need to work on, like holding my tongue for a start. But I think I've got better in how I deliver my messages. And I think particularly as a black woman, that's really important, because I've always been mindful of, for some people, their expectations of you will come from stereotypes because they've not had any interaction or close interactions with someone like you. And I felt that particularly in certain spaces that I've worked in. And I was always adamant that I didn't want to be the stereotype. So whatever you think you know about a black woman, this ain't it. Yeah? This is not, you're not going to have that. You're not going to have the angry, whatever it might be that you're expecting. I want to be the complete opposite. And I've always felt to myself, I want to exceed expectations. And in some cases, I think I probably have. There are cases where I probably haven't, and I might have just met typical stereotype. I know with my timekeeping. No, but there are areas where it's a real effort to be in spaces that you're not naturally comfortable in.
Yeah.
And I would say I've probably felt, as much as, because I've always been ambitious and wanted to progress my career, there's probably been some elements of conforming. And I say conforming because I feel that I've been able to be successful through being everything, people feel comfortable around people who are like them. And if people can attach themselves to something that might be similar or makes them feel safe or comfortable, they will gravitate towards you. And I felt like, and if we want to have conversations about, can you be your authentic self in the workplace? I don't think the workplace is the place for me to be my authentic self.
Wow.
I think the workplace is the place for me to be my professional self. And I think my authentic self is reserved for my friends and family. And when I say authentic, I'm saying I'm in a role where I'm able to embrace my culture as part of delivering my role, because I'm in equality, diversity and inclusion, and, you know, organising things for Black History Month. I am definitely bringing my culture every day. And I'm also in a space where, being, you know, the head of equality and diversity, I love the fact that I can wear vibrant, like, African prints to work if I want to. And, you know, it can be expected. If I were in a different environment and perhaps not in this role, would I feel that it's safe to do that? I think from doing this role, yes, I would. I will bring that uniqueness. I've got the confidence now to bring that to any other environment. Whereas before, I think I wouldn't have wanted to stand out in that way. Whereas now I do feel empowered to stand out in that way and stand behind the fact that with this Black woman, I'm bringing Black culture. And I'm not saying that's not my authentic self. I'm saying there are things that I don't think belong in the workplace that I don't bring to work.
Because you choose not to, or because you feel it will have a detrimental impact on your career or the perception of others on you?
I think probably a combination of both. I think I choose not to because I don't think work is a safe space. And as much as I've tried to, through my work, create
a safe space to be your true self?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think it's a safe space. Because whilst we are advocating for equality, diversity and inclusion, a term that people will be able to identify with is unconscious bias. It still exists. And you are always still subjected to that kind of scrutiny or that perception, whether it be from your close team that you work with and people that know you, or it be other stakeholders or people that you come into contact with, which is why you're never safe. I just feel like you're never safe. So,
and when you mention conforming versus authenticity, let's just land it like that for a minute. So authenticity being able to really represent in your true self. Do you feel, I mean, it's a slightly different question for you because you've actually jumped in with working with head teachers at early 20s. So, but do you feel as you've progressed through the years, moving into leadership now, it's easier to not conform and bring more authenticity, or has it gone the other way where you're feeling like you're having to conform the further you're progressing up?
From my personal experience, I think that it's 50-50. And I think the skill is knowing where, and I don't think I've mastered this skill by any means, but I think the skill is knowing to what degree it's safe to bring certain things into the workplace and what degree to leave things behind. I think working particularly in local government is always very political. So you've got to balance that. You have to balance the political agenda that sometimes will not align with your personal beliefs with doing your job. And there are times where I've had to say to myself in my role that this is not about Sharie, this is about the organisation, and you have to represent the organisation. It doesn't matter if that's your view or not.
Yeah.
This is not about you. You are not running your own company right now. You are working on behalf of a collective. You represent the collective. And sometimes I've had to have that kind of harsh conversation with myself to remind myself of how I might need to conduct myself going into certain spaces.
There's a part of me listening to you that I'm thinking, that's really sensible, Sharie. And then there's another part that's really sad as well, that you feel that. And actually, a lot of people probably feel that, but don't even recognize it or push it to the back of their minds, that they have to know what part of themselves to leave, what part of themselves to bring with them into their careers. It's sad that you even have to think like that, isn't it?
I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like that's something I've always done. Like as a kid.
It's a matter of fact.
Well, just, code switching. Like as a kid, I knew, like I would pick up things in the playground from other kids and, even swear words. I didn't hear swear words in my home. I heard them in the playground.
Yeah.
But I knew they weren't going back in my home. Like my parents, I knew, do you know what I mean? I knew I could not use that language at home. And cheekily, Mum, I didn't, it wasn't me. My friends put me up to it. But, I would use swear words at school, but I knew they had no place in my home. So for me, it's always been about understanding what's appropriate in the space that you're in. You know, even when, you know, we used to talk like slang as kids in school, my mum didn't want to hear that at home. That's not how you speak. So I knew that wasn't appropriate to do in front of parents or elders. So I didn't. That was reserved for being with my peer group. So I think I've grown up knowing that this is for the workplace. This is for my personal space. This is for my girls. This is for my friends. This is for my partner. This is, you know what I mean? Whatever it might be. But knowing and understanding what's appropriate in different environments.
I've always admired that in you. I don't know if I've ever actually said it, but you've been someone who, you mentioned words like focus from an early age. Yes, the work hard is there, but actually the additional attribute that you've had that people maybe wouldn't have early on is that level of focus. But also, I remember once you said to me, whatever role you're in, you should work like you're in the next role. And you mentioned vision, and you mentioned networking and almost people watching and learning and reflecting. And these are things that naturally don't fall in our domain for some reason or other. It's just the work hard and the doing that's always there, and all the additional parts that you've mentioned. And I see that you really do represent in your role on a daily basis. It's just brilliant to see. And I want to know where that comes from. Is it just, I mean, you're talking about all the way back from school, you knew how to navigate the environment. And is it just something that's rooted in you? Is it something or someone that has embedded that in you?
I think it's, I'd probably deem it to be emotional intelligence. And I think I just feel like I just learned it. I'm like, doesn't everyone do that? Yeah. Like, it's just something that I learn. And I'm just wondering.
I guess one way to put it is, one of my biggest challenges that I've recognised is I am Aisha everywhere. So the way I talk to my kids, my husband, my friends, the chief exec, directors, my team, it's pretty much the same.
Oh my God, you're saying I'm a psychopath. No, I'm joking.
No.
I've got a split personality.
I only wish. But this is a skill that I really need to work on, which is the art of being able to navigate different environments.
Why do you though?
But you've just explained it, haven't you? That you need to know what is appropriate.
I need to.
Where?
Because that's appropriate for me.
I don't know. I wonder if it's something that I need to reflect on. I really believe that part of the skill in networking, which again doesn't come naturally very often to people that are from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds, is to know different techniques of speaking, presenting, and approaching people in different ways. And it's just something I don't have. I am just that one person, the same all the time. And I don't think that works to my advantage.
Do you know what? Having said that has made me think about, like, one of the messages that I got from my mum when I was growing up was, as a Black woman, you have to work 10 times harder. And I think that,
Wow.
you know, I've gone into everything from an early age, knowing that as a Black woman, I would be treated differently. I remember I think I might have been 9 years old, and I was called the N-word by a child that was younger than me, and I had to ask my mum what that meant because I didn't even know, which says a lot about the fact that that term's bandied around in that child's house, but obviously not used in mine. I think maybe knowing that I would be treated differently, I had to protect myself, which is why I was saying about going into spaces where you know they're not safe. And that was my bubble. Do you know what I mean? Like, my professional persona was my protection bubble, so to speak. Because I also knew that any interaction I have, I'm having an interaction with you, but you're also already judging me based on previous interactions you might have had, and also possibly with, again, stereotypes or tropes that you might associate with a Black woman. And like I've said, I've not wanted to identify with some of those things, which is why I've been really conscious about, am I refined enough in the workplace? Because I know as a Black woman, if I'm threatening, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not progressing at all. So I've also known that I've had to be palatable, and I've had to, you know, like I said, some of that slang that I was talking when I was younger in school, it's not appropriate in the workplace. You don't want to hear that, because that says ignorance, it says uneducated, it says whatever those, do you know what I mean? Whatever those stereotypes or tropes might be, that you're affiliating such language or behaviour or speech with possibly negative connotations. And I just thought, I don't want to be associated with that, which is why I feel like I have had to be quite different in the workplace.
That's very powerful what you've just said there, because it's made me reflect how I was at school. And actually being brought up in Tower Hamlets, it was majority Bangladeshis anyway.
Yeah.
So I've never
You've been able to be yourself
as a child. I've been able to be myself. So I've just kind of never needed to consider or think about my approach or how I represent or all of those things from an early age, which obviously from your experience, you've had to do that from very early on. So it's amazing how it goes all the way back to then in terms of defining how we are now as well. Was there a moment in your career where you thought, I've achieved this and it's felt that good, I know I can be whoever I want to be?
I had a moment like that this week, actually.
Oh, wow.
I had a moment like this.
Recent as that?
Well, yeah, it was weird. And then I think, where I've said to you about being focused, and sometimes, the things that we want or the things that we pray for, and then actually realising that we're receiving them, sometimes I think we forget to be grateful for them. But I remember possibly when I was in secondary school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what the job was, but I just knew I wanted to be a boss. And maybe that's what's driven me.
In secondary school?
In secondary school. I just knew I wanted to be at the top, which is why I'm saying to you, these experiences where I'm working with leaders have been really, like I said, I've just emulated them. I've just wanted to kind of replicate those behaviours that are going to kind of help me get to where I want to go. And I remember sitting, I just had this vision of me sat in a boardroom at the head of the table, and everyone kind of just listening to me, like I was the focal point. And then we had some interviews earlier this week where that I remember sitting at the head of the table thinking, do you remember you dreamt this? Like, just,
wow.
That kind of reality moment. And actually feeling, but I also think that comes with a lot of reflection about where I am in my career right now and where I want to go and how I'm kind of moving forward. So that was kind of a bit of I think there's been moments throughout my career, and I remember there's been moments of ultimate highs. Like when I worked for the Multi-Academy Trust, I loved organising training. I love being in training rooms.
Still shine up.
And you see what I'm saying? Like how I light up, like facilitating training and people having that eureka moment where they're just like, oh my gosh, I get it. This is making a difference. I've always enjoyed empowering and uplifting people, and being able to do that through my roles has been brilliant. I've really, really loved that. Because I feel like I can see the value I'm adding in the giving back. And I think that's, like being on the front line, whereas actually when you're kind of when you're in the back office, creating policies and procedures that are aimed to make a difference, you don't really know whether or not they're going to land in the way that you intend them to. But when you're actually in the room with people and you're seeing the change you're making, it's such an incredible thing. And I think that kind of inspires me and motivates me to keep going. And that sometimes it's moments like that reinforce my self-confidence.
Yes.
And I know that, all throughout my career, I've had knocks, and I think I take my career and take myself quite seriously. And I've had confidence knocks where I didn't quite get something right and I've kicked myself, or I felt like I didn't do it as well as it could have been done. And, you kind of beat yourself up. But then I have these moments where I do things that are really well received, and that is almost like my validation. Like that is what inspires me and motivates me to know that I'm capable and I'm competent. We all make mistakes, yes. It's how we learn from those mistakes and how we go on to do great things that I think are really important.
So you've taken us through some of your highest points. Have there been, I don't know why I'm asking have there been, because
there have been.
Yeah.
You don't have highs without the lows.
You don't have highs without the lows. Have there been moments over the years when something hasn't gone to plan, or where you still feel like there's something that you see in leaders that you just can't quite figure out for yourself, where it's almost taking you to a level of thinking, is there any point in this? Is it ever going to work out? Or has it gone the other way where actually working through it has just continued to build your resilience.
This is a real interview question, isn't it?
I know. We go in hard.
Yeah, okay. I think my journey's been interesting recently, and I think particularly being in the EDI space and having, COVID was such an educational journey in terms of, I felt like COVID forced us all to become humans.
True. Yeah.
It forced us to become humans in the sense of we suddenly were so much more compassionate, considerate and understanding. For the first time ever, we started going into our colleagues' homes in a way that we'd never before through the kind of online working, and understanding that, people had to go and pick up their kids, or people had health issues and had to isolate. And then obviously we did a series of kind of different workshops where we were understanding the lived experiences of our colleagues, but also the communities in which we served in a more meaningful way, and how people were impacted by the pandemic, what that meant for families, not being able to feed their families, what that meant for multi-generations living in a household, and, how, our older family members might have been more at risk. And I think through that, it's made me think about all of my staff members as individuals. And I think I've adopted more of a personalised approach to supporting each of them, understanding their needs, and also understanding some of the challenges that exist for them in their personal lives. And I think that what I've not found helpful in the workplace is comparisons. And working in environments where there's high challenge, we also need that high support, and we also need to nurture. If we are really going to understand privilege and disadvantage, we have to understand that not everyone's coming from the same place. So we might all be in the same office working together, but we've all had different journeys and routes in. We might all be heads of service or, senior leaders, but our routes in have all been different. And I think that my experience is that we need to celebrate the uniqueness of our individuals more, to make people feel safe, to make diverse spaces safe and inclusive. And if we can understand what the uniqueness is that each individual is bringing and the challenge that they've had to get there, I feel that should demand more respect. And I feel my route into where I am is completely different to some of my counterparts. We didn't all go the graduate route and, have support from our families or come from wealthy families or go to great universities. Some of us have just worked in the space a long time and worked our way up and navigated in different ways. It doesn't make that person any less valuable. It just means that the skills that they bring into the space are different. Their perspective is completely different. And to me, that's what equity is. It's about respecting those differences and admiring that diversity, because I think I bring a very different and quite a unique skill set to any projects I do. I think that it's also been one of the reasons that I've been really good at, probably one of my strengths is building relationships and engaging different types of people. Because I have that compassion, I have that understanding that the minute you start talking to me, I'm going to learn from you, because your experience and your perspective is completely different to mine, and I'm open to understanding that. And I think that's also empowering those that are around me. And I just think that a lot of people think about diversity, particularly in senior leadership spaces in organisations, as just having people from different backgrounds. For me, it's also about understanding where those people have come from to be in the room with you, and recognising that their journey might not have been as difficult or as easy as yours has. And we have to respect the fact that they're in that space. And we have to, treating people equally. I found as well that if you want to call it, again, unconscious bias, that can lead to people being treated differently. That can lead to people being held to different standards of account than others. And we've got to watch ourselves when we're doing that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm almost thinking about how the whole framework of management, whether it's performance management, whether it's just the basics, and it all stems on people's weaknesses rather than their strengths. It's kind of, and obviously there's an assumption that comes naturally, but does it? Do people start jumping on looking at the weaknesses that their employees have rather than thinking about strengths and placing them in areas where their strengths can really shine? And because actually that difference in them might be seen as a weakness when actually in many ways it could be an amazing thing and difference that they're bringing to the way of working.
See, I also think of things differently. Like, our strengths are the things that we enjoy and that we can do quite easily. Why are we not starting from our weaknesses? Like, you're only as strong as the weakest person in the room. Like, if you're a team, do you see what I mean? So I'm just, and not, not to say that people are weak. I don't, I suppose the point I'm trying to make is, if we keep doing the things that we think make us strong, what about the things that we're not good at? And it's easy to move away from the things that we're scared of, the things that we're insecure about. So that's why I'm always just like, why are we not reinforcing our weaknesses? Which is why I've always said to you that I'm someone, I've pushed myself out of my comfort zone. I don't like doing that. It doesn't make me feel comfortable, but this is the only way I'm going to grow. And by doing the things that I'm already capable and confident of doing, I'm in this comfort zone. So I'm very much about, let's get out of comfort zones and stay out of comfort zones. We're going to be out of a comfort zone for a little while, but then we'll just go back in, because that's not changing anything. And, we think about systemic and institutional racism. Let's use the Met Police, for example, saying actually there is no racism in the Met Police. Okay, that might be your experience, but if there are people that are saying there is, why don't we see where it is and see what we can do to manage it and stomp it out? Why are we starting from what we think our strengths are? Why are we undermining the experiences of others if we're not? And also, how can you receive a report that categorically tells you there's fundamentally racism in the institution, but you're going to deny it?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you're reflecting that not just from an individual perspective, but also from an organisational lens. And what I really liked is what you mentioned about just taking it back, all the way from COVID as well, to just, we're all humans at the end of the day, and we've all got our stories, we've all got our journeys and experiences. And some of what we've lost and lockdowns almost brought back is taking that into consideration in terms of our working approach. And it's not just ticking things and doing things, but it's actually the engaging, the relationships are almost as if not more important.
Yeah. I definitely think that COVID was a time where everyone was so much more loving, more understanding, more compassionate, more emphatic. And I just think we're moving away from that. I've worked in spaces where, if you're too nice, you're too soft, and it won't deliver outcomes. I think everything is about balance. We have to have that high challenge, but we have to have that high support. And I try to deliver that with my teams that I work with. I don't know if I always get it right, but I am going to challenge you and I'm going to push you out of your comfort zone, but I'm going to support you to grow and to feel safe to make mistakes. Because if you do not make mistakes, you are not going to improve.
First of all, that sounds exhausting.
It's hard work.
But secondly, do you think a lot of people in the Black, Asian, minority, ethnic demographic do tend to not want to take too many risks because the battle is just too hard, or prefer to stay in comfort zones? Or, I've come across people who kind of like, I'm happy with what I'm doing. I'm happy to just do this for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Or do you think we have a responsibility, especially as managers, to move them out of that and encourage them to really be at the strongest point that they're clearly capable of? Or do you think too many people from Black, Asian, minority, ethnic backgrounds do choose the comfort route, or, being in that?
We're generalising. We're generalising, and I think
as I was saying it, I was hearing it as well.
It's a dangerous place to be. But I think, we know with people, we have to meet people where they are. There are people that want to progress, and there are people that don't.
Yeah.
And I think, and again, talking about my team, based on what colleagues have said to me about wanting to progress, that's when I'm pushing you out of a comfort zone, because that's how you're going to grow. But people that are happy to just be in a role, that's fine.
And you don't think that has anything to do with race? It's just an individual?
I mean, for some people, that I think that culture could play a part of that, not necessarily wanting to aspire to more or having enough. And for some people, I wouldn't say to meet you that my culture's impacted that. I'd probably say more it's my personality. I'm ambitious because I think I'm just a very ambitious person. And I think, I've got family members who are ambitious, family members who are not, family members who, and ambition's also a scale. Like, there's levels to this ambition. I always want to be at the top if I can. It comes with the height. No, I'm joking. But there are people that can work to a certain point and feel that this is where I'm good at. I don't want to take on any more responsibility. I don't want to be accountable any more than I am. And I can understand that and I can completely respect that. And some people just want a mastery, like just fully understand the level in which they're working at, be an expert in that level and feel that they're competent and confident in what they're doing. So I definitely think it's about respecting that for each individual, but I think it's understanding, and this is what I mean about working with people that you understand, understanding your teams and the people that are working with you and where they are and why they're there. Is it a cultural reason? Is that where they want to be? And I think through like doing coaching training and having coaching conversations with people, it's really, you can always tease out if it's a self-limiting belief, why they think that they should be where they are, or if that's genuinely where they're happy.
And this is the part we haven't even touched on, where on top of being at the peak of what you do, you've also got another 100 things in the background.
No, babe, that's you.
Going as well. You as well, Sharie, you do a lot and everything to an exceptional standard, because you do hold, some really high standards for yourself, and you continue to meet it as well. If you were to look back on your career, do you feel like it went exactly as it should have? Or given the reflection and all the learning and all those positive things that you've carried with you, do you think, if I did that differently?
I was having a conversation recently as well about, because, obviously I'm a kind of about visions, missions, all the rest of it. And like purpose, like what is my purpose? And I still feel like I don't actually know. Like, I feel like I would like to be knowing or feeling like I'm working in my purpose. And I see a lot of people, even on social media, influencers, all the rest of it, people that are working in their purpose. And I love that. I'm going to say to you that in every role I've had, there's been so much turbulence for different reasons at different stages as well.
Could anything have changed from you for that not to have happened, or no?
No, I think it's peaks and troughs. Like sometimes it's, it might be politics that happen in the workplace. It might be something that's happening in your personal life that's impacting the way that you are in the workplace. I feel maybe one of the things, if I were to change anything, one of the things I might have liked to have changed was being more decisive about what I wanted. And I think like anything, as we get older, we become more confident, we become more self-assured. Which I have done, but I always try to keep that with humility, in the sense of there are things that I feel confident and that I'm good at, and there are things that I would love to improve on and be better at. I think we all have that, and I think that we've all got our blind spots. Yeah. So where I might say I think there's an area I need to work on, someone else would say, "Oh my God, I thought you were quite good at that." But I think you really probably need to work on this. And I think that's another fundamental thing, like having people that will tell you that, because you don't know where your blind spots are. So we do need, and this is what I mean about working in nurturing environments where there's high levels of trust as well as challenge. Knowing that when you used to give me advice, I knew it was always coming from a place that I could trust, because we had a rapport when we worked together. Whereby I knew that you'd be honest with me and you wouldn't be saying things to spite me, but you were saying it because you genuinely felt that actually that's something that I could have done better. And something right in the forefront of my mind, but I knew you were right. And I think it's about that ability to apply yourself consistently. And sometimes you just don't always have the fuel in the tank to be able to do that. But just like I said, personally, knowing the areas that I've personally felt that I've needed to work on has been really important. In terms of whether or not I would change anything, I think everything... Sorry, I had a flash of Game of Thrones.
Oh, wow.
In my
Very
mind,
relevant.
Everything you've done leads you to here. I think Bran says it in the chair, but okay.
I'm keeping that in, by the way.
Yeah. Everything you've done has led you to where you are now. And So from that perspective, it might have been good to have done things differently, but I think all I can do now is take what I've learned and apply it to making sure that I do things differently. And you'll keep mixing things up. But yeah, I don't know that I'd change anything specifically.
And your reference to...
What, Game of Thrones? No.
There is that. We'll talk about that offline. Your reference to people also highlighting areas for improvement or having that relationship, I suppose, of trust with someone that really is able to give you that insight that maybe you might not even realise. Is that something you feel we should go and seek out? Or do you think it's just being in the right culture because certain organisations and cultures just have that embedded? Or do you think for anybody that happens to start a career in public sector or anywhere, that's one of the things you'd say, go and seek out people that you can build a relationship with, either senior or maybe not. I don't know if you mean a mentor or anything, where you can get that level of insight, honest insight and reflection on how you come across.
I mean, I think there's easy ways to do it. Like, I think through like performance management techniques, do you know what I mean? Like, I think 360s can be quite helpful in terms of how you're gathering that feedback, because you can choose people that you trust to give you that feedback in that kind of sense. I definitely would say to everybody, if you can have a coach or a mentor, get one, because it encourages self-reflection in a way that you might not necessarily reflect yourself. And also someone to kind of direct you when you feel that you might get stuck.
We've come on to the last question, which I'll be asking everyone on this podcast, which is, if an organisation, be it in the public sector or wherever, could do one thing to just genuinely improve the lack of representation in senior leadership, and it's quite a big question, but if there was one thing that you feel would make a huge difference and it just doesn't happen enough, what would it be?
See, this should have been a discussion item rather than a question, because I feel like the answer is quite complex. Because I think about, like, you know, like earlier when I said to you, there are environments that I wouldn't want to work being the token Black person. If you have got an environment that is predominantly white, it's going to be hard to attract and keep people from diverse backgrounds. You really have to change the culture. And I think taking those steps to change the culture, it takes time, and it takes effort, and most importantly, it takes consistency. Because as I've said before, if someone doesn't feel safe in the space, they're not going to stay. And if the environment is not conducive to that person's safety, they're not going to stay.
Is that an easy win? Is there something an organisation can quickly do, or you feel should put the work in to make it happen, even if it takes a few years, that makes that difference or makes someone feel more safe?
I think there's ways to enable that safety. And I think, you know, sometimes we get so caught up in the operations of what we're trying to do as an organisation. Yeah. We sometimes forget about our staff. And I think that we need to continuously, to create that culture, we need to communicate within the organisation. And I'm talking about the senior leaders holding a space with junior members of staff. I think for me, if I were a corporate director, I think something I would want to do at random is maybe once a month have, or maybe once a week, I don't know what the frequency would be, depending on how busy my diary is, but just have half an hour catch-ups with different members of staff in the organisation from different backgrounds to get a sense of the different experiences or perceptions of the organisation. Because I think you and I both know, working in different parts of the organisation, the culture is different. If you're frontline facing, if you're close to the corporate centre, if you're working with service providers, it's always different. So my perception of and you know, when I was working for the Multi Academy Trust, each academy was different because the leadership was different, the culture in that school was different, the demographic of children in that school was different. So what I'm saying is, have an understanding of the difference that exists in the organisation and really understand the different experiences and perceptions of different staff from different backgrounds. And I think you have to do it without judgment. People are going to say things that you don't like or you don't want to hear about the organisation, but that is their experience, that's their truth, that is their perception. You can't take it away. And actually, if you keep hearing that noise from different people, you've got a problem in your organisation. And if you don't have that understanding of the different people that make up your organisation and the experiences that they have, you're not creating an environment that is reflective of the organisation or the community at the top tier. So my thing is, you have to have that understanding in order to create the safe spaces at the top. You also have to understand what people are saying about how to support them to transition. Because I think in terms of creating a diverse senior tier, you have to have diversity at different levels in the organisation. And in order to have diversity in different levels of organisation, you have to have a process that enables people to move up. So I'm not talking necessarily about having training opportunities specifically for specific demographics, but if that's what your organisation needs, that's what your organisation needs, and that's what you need to do. But I think it is, what is the talent pipeline? And succession planning and talent management is so easily overlooked. As a manager, I should be saying that person has got potential. This is where I think we need to nurture it. They're going to be your next whatever grade it is or whatever it might. Do you see what I mean? Like, we need to be doing that in a concerted way, and we need to be like recognizing where the skills are and where we think people, or even the personality types we would want leading our organisation, and encourage them to move up. And I think through having more diversity at different levels, you'll start to attract the diversity at the top, because whatever's happening inside is permeating out.
Yes.
So we need to do the work inside. We need to do the work in-house so it radiates out, and people are starting to recognise that this is a place that's really diverse, it's really inclusive. They recognise and understand the voices and the experiences and the skills of others. It's, you know, there's high challenge, but with that high challenge, there's high support. So I think, like I said, I think the answer is very complex, but I do think that you have to understand the needs of your diverse users or your diverse staff in order to be inclusive at the top. And sometimes you have to admit, and it's really hard, you have to be able to say, I don't know, I need to ask somebody else. It's okay to, you know, to clarify, or do research to understand better, improve your understanding. Go to organisations that are doing well with diverse recruitment and find out what they're doing and how they're creating the culture. Because ultimately, the biggest thing is the culture. If the culture is not right, whatever you try to do will not be sustainable. You have to shift the culture, and it has to be meaningful.
What an amazing final response. Because honestly, there was a part of me that was, as I was asking the question, I was thinking, it's quite a big question, and even then you said, it's quite complex. But then you've given the most simplest but most effective solutions. And sometimes I just think, you know, even going back to the corporate director, just meeting with staff on the ground, one-on-one, 30 minutes here and there, just understanding from them how it's going. So easy, but so effective. And sometimes you just think, why do we overcomplicate everything? Why do we think that trying to enable representation has to be this big, complex system of a whole program with a whole division, with a whole... When
it's
actually,
doing your research, it's doing your own research and looking at the themes for yourself. It's not necessarily people saying to you, because I've even found that, you know, in staff networks, those that shout the loudest, and it's those that are most unhappy that tend to shout the loudest. Yeah. And then you've got the people that I want to hear from, and the people that are so deflated and dejected, they don't even want to talk to you. They're so done. They're so disengaged.
They don't even show up anymore.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's those the people that I want to, you know, why have you got to this stage? What's caused this? How could things be different? What one thing would you advise me to do? And if you took one thing from everybody, you might start to notice a theme.
Wow. Sharie, thank you so much for being so transparent, so inspirational as well. I've taken so much learning. You probably don't even realise, but when you watch this back, I've taken so much learning from what you've said. And I just want to thank you for your time, for your honesty, and for your reflections.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I hope what I've said is, useful. But yeah, no, I really appreciate being here today. Thank you
very much.